Good morning. Happy Monday. I finished Where the Red Fern Grows, and I was going to be done, but then I thought of another really good book one of my favorites from years gone by, and it's really short, so it'll be done in probably 4 days maybe. And I have to read it off my iPad because I couldn't find it anywhere, and so I got an electronic copy from the library. So, the name of the book is Mick Was Here by Barbara Park. She's the author from the Junie B. Jones books. So, here we go. Chapter 1. Mick. Just let me say right off the bat, it was a bike accident. It was about as accidental as you can get to. Like Mick wasn't riding crazy or dodging in and out of traffic. And both of his hands were on the handlebars and all that. His tire just hit a rock, and he skidded into the back of a passing truck. And that was that. There wasn't a scratch on him. It was a head injury. Period. So this isn't the kind of book where you meet the main character and you get to like him real well, and then he dies at the end. I hate those kind of books. And besides, I can't think of anything worse than using my brother's accident as the tear-jerking climax to some tragic story. I don't want to make you cry. I just want to tell you about Mick. But I thought you should know right up front that he's not here anymore. I just thought that would be fair. I'm only 10 months older than he was. Mick was a surprise. He loved it too, being a surprise. I mean, he was always teasing my parents about it. Just imagine the stunts I'll pull when I'm a sneaky, rebellious teenager, he'd say. Then he'd rub his hands together and throw his head way back and do that kind of creepy laugh that mad scientists do in the movies. You know, like, "Mwah." And he'd hunch over and limp out of the room like Igor or something. Mick was excellent at imitating voices, by the way. We have a tape of him yelling, "I'm melting, I'm melting." That sounds just like the Wicked Witch of the West and the Wizard of Oz. Exactly, I mean. But even without playing the tape, I can still remember how he sounded. I've heard that sometimes when people you love die, you forget their voices. But I haven't forgotten Mick's. Not yet, anyway. I have a weird kind of memory, I think. Sorry, my allergies. I have a weird kind of memory, I think. I've never once been able to remember my parents' anniversary in time to buy them a card. But I can still remember the exact conversation I had with Santa Claus when I was in kindergarten. He said, "Ho, ho, ho." I said, "Your breath smells." And he said, "Get down." It wasn't much of a chat, but the point is, it happened 8 years ago, and I still remember it like yesterday. That's why it doesn't surprise me that I can remember everything about the fight Mick and I had 4 weeks ago, on the morning of the accident. It started out like most any other day at our house. My father was running around wearing his usual morning outfit, a shirt and tie, boxer shorts, and black socks. It's pretty humiliating being related to a man in a getup like that. But Pop never puts on his pants till right before he leaves for the office. He doesn't want to ruin the crease before he has to, he says. I'm serious. My mother has already left for work wearing her usual pair of jeans. But don't think the jeans mean she's more laid back than Pop. All they mean is that she works at a research lab doing experiments with viruses, and she doesn't like to spill germs on her good clothes. Both of my parents are totally different from Mick and me. They're real methodical and organized, and everything they do is always technically planned out. Like, my mom never makes hamburgers for dinner without weighing out precise quarter-pound servings on her kitchen scale. And Pop's idea of a daring adventure is to wash his socks without pinning them to their mates. Also, I've got name tags sewn into my underwear, and I've never been to camp, which is downright disturbing when you think about it. On top of all that, my parents hate family conflict worse than any parents I've ever seen. Like, my brother and I could hardly even raise our voices at each other before we'd be hustled off to our rooms to think about how we could have resolved our differences in a more civilized and resourceful manner. Last year, my mother even made a schedule for me and Mick to follow on school mornings so we could all start the day without confrontation. It was pretty simple, actually. Mick got the bathroom for 20 minutes while I ate breakfast. Then a timer would go off and we'd switch rooms. At least we were supposed to switch rooms. But every so often, one of us would run late and we'd find ourselves in the same room at the same time. When that happened, we almost always ended up fighting. Because, my parents did sort of expect it of us and all, and we really hated to disappoint them. That's why, when Mick walked into the kitchen that morning and saw me digging around in the cereal box, he couldn't wait to get something started. The first thing he did was try to grab the box away from me. "What's in there? What are you looking for? Let me see," he said. I held on as tight as I could and turned my back to him. "No, get away! Get out of here!" I yelled. I couldn't see what he was doing behind my back. Couldn't hear him either, which worried me a lot, because Mick was always at his most dangerous when he was quiet. Then, suddenly out of nowhere, he came bounding off a kitchen chair and snatched the box right out of my hands. "Hey, give it back! I mean it, Mick! That tattoo is mine!" As soon as I said the word tattoo, his eyes opened real wide and he grinned that stupid grin of his. Then he reached right in and pulled it out, no trouble at all. He dangled it in front of my face. It was one of those ugly skull and crossbones pirate tattoos. I should probably mention that I didn't really want the tattoo, but the point was, I didn't want him to have it, which I happen to think is a perfectly legitimate reason for fighting. It just wasn't fair, that's all. Mick almost always got to the cereal toys before me. Then he'd hide them in his room and pretend he didn't know a thing about them. But I know for a fact he had at least 5 Super Balls and 2 pairs of 3D glasses hidden in there somewhere. "Come on, Mick, I want that tattoo. Hand it over." "Say please." "Please, okay? Now let me have it." He tapped his chin. "Gee, I don't know, Phoebe. I hate to be picky, but your please wasn't all that polite. Why don't you try it again, only this time say pretty please with sugar on top?" I swear I could not believe he was doing this to me. "Pretty please with sugar on top. Now give it." But even before I finished, Mick was already shaking his head again. "No, sorry, but it's still not working for me. Maybe we should try something different this time. How about this? Try, Wee Willie Winky went to town, upstairs, downstairs, in his nightgown." That's when I jumped on top of him and wrestled him to the ground. I realize I'm too old to do stuff like that, but I'm not that bad of a wrestler, and I'm not quite ready to give it up. Anyhow, I almost had Mick in a headlock when my father walked in on us. Men who walk around in boxer shorts and socks are deceptively quiet, by the way. He didn't yell. Pop almost never yells. Instead, he just folded his arms and gave us one of those looks of his. This was the one where he rolls his eyeballs so far back in his head he can see his brain, probably. Then he heaves this huge sigh, like having 2 children who fight over a press-on tattoo is a hardship too great for any human being to bear. Trying to save his own skin, Mick jumped right up. "Here, Pop, quick, take this. Phoebe wanted it for yourself, but I thought you might want to wear it to the office today." He tried to press it into my father's wrist, but it wouldn't stick to the hair. So he just kept slapping at it. "Boy, they sure don't make tattoos like they did when you were young, lad, do they, Pop?" My father knew Mick was only joking around, but he didn't lighten up or anything. He just pointed his finger, first in my face and then in Mick's, and squinted his eyes in his silent treatment thing he does. Then, with the tattoo still hanging off his hand, he swiveled on his sock feet and padded out of the kitchen. "Yeah, but wait, Pop," I called. "That tattoo was mine. All I was doing was getting it out of the box and Mick jumped on me." My father kept going. "Can I please have it back? Please?" Pop's bedroom door slammed. I was steaming mad, really fuming, but instead of backing off and letting me calm down, Mick started teasing me in this stupid pirate voice, saying stuff like, "Shiver me timbers," and "Thar she blows," totally cracking himself up. That's when I shoved him into the refrigerator and called him a name that I'd never called anybody in my whole life before. A really ugly name. I mean, a street word that you mostly hear you only hear on HBO or on school playgrounds. It shocked him that I said it. It shocked me, too. But instead of apologizing, I just turned my mouth up in this nasty little grin. Mick pushed me away hard. "You're cool, Phoebe," he said. Then he walked out of the room. That was our last morning together. The last one ever, I mean. It kills me when I remember that, because usually I hardly cuss at all. At least not as much as most kids my age. I don't think. Mick didn't either, which is almost weird for a 7th grade boy. Not that the two of us were angels or anything. I'm not saying that. We were always getting in trouble. But normally it was for stuff we did together, as a team. Because even though it sounds corny and all, when we weren't fighting, my brother and I actually liked each other a lot. But, I think it was the result of being so close in age. Like when Mick was learning to talk, I was the only one who could understand him, so I sort of became his translator. I mean, right from the beginning, I knew that truck meant dog, and that memefluzit meant he wanted to flush the toilet. The first big caper we pulled off was right after Mick started kindergarten. That was when we defaced our first property. To be specific, we scratched the letters F-A-R-T in the new driveway that had been just been poured next to our house. We didn't do it to be bad. It's just that I was learning how to spell, and Mick was learning how to print, and the cement just sort of called to us, I guess you'd say. Mick promised that if I would tell him the right letters, he'd do a good job with his printing. He did, too. I mean, his R was backward, but at the time, neither of us knew the difference. All I remember is how excited we both were when we finished. We clapped and jumped up and down and totally laughed our heads off. Without a doubt, this was the funniest thing anyone had ever done in the entire history of the universe. It's amazing how a little fart in the driveway can totally lose its humor when your father sees it. I don't really want to go into all the details of what happened when he discovered it that night, but I will tell you that when he and Mom stood us in front of them and made us solemnly swear to tell them the complete and honest truth about how it got there, Mick swallowed hard, took a big step forward, and told them a monkey did it. Seriously, he said that. The trouble was, I had to back him up on it. I didn't really have a choice, you know? So I stood there and swore that we had both seen a monkey run into the driveway with a little stick in his hand and write fart in the concrete. Then, just to make the story even more believable, Mick said the monkey's name was Zippy. And the two of us had saved the day by chasing him all the way back to Africa. We ended up going to our rooms for a week or something, I think. But after a while, it became one of those things that everyone looks back on and laughs about. Like, even on the morning of the fight, when I went out the door and saw that backward R in the cement, I smiled a little bit. I didn't want to, but I did. Sirens. I walked to school with my best friend, Zoe Santos. In elementary school, we used to ride our bikes, but mine's pink, with a white basket. Which was fine in 4th grade, but I figure my teen years are going to be hard enough without being seen around town on a bike that little Bo Peep would have picked. Mick didn't have that problem. His bike was black and chrome, which is why he could still ride it to school and not look like a complete doofus. Not looking like a doofus was pretty important to Mick, actually. It's not that he was conceited. It's just that when he was 8, my mother made the mistake of showing him his christening gown, and he never really got over it. I mean, who could blame him? It was this long, lacy white thing with blue ribbons and a matching lace hat. He had a fit when he saw it. "But that's a dress!" he shouted. "You mean you took me to church in a dress? Oh, and people saw me in it? And they knew I was a guy?" My mother explained that it wasn't really a dress. It was a gown. The same gown my father had worn. And my grandfather, too. But nothing helped. For the rest of the year, the only thing Mick would wear to Sunday school without a battle was a black t-shirt with a motorcycle on the front of it and the kind of camouflage pants that Marines wear. They were neatly pressed, though. In this ridiculous compromise with my father, Mick agreed to let Pop iron creases down the pant legs. Anyway, it didn't take long before it was the only outfit he'd wear to school. Which sounds extreme and all, but the school psychologist told my mother it was Mick's way of balancing out the trauma of being paraded around in public wearing ladies' sleepwear. By 4th grade, he had finally gotten over his obsession with macho clothes and became trendy instead. In fact, he got so picky about what he wore, my parents would actually flip a coin to see who had to take him to buy school clothes. The first time my father lost the toss, he came home from his day at the mall with some of his hair pulled out. Still, even Pop had to admit that Mick was a pretty sharp dresser. A lot of girls had crushes on him, but other than me, the only girl he hung around with was Zoe. They really liked each other too. Not like boyfriend and girlfriend, I don't mean, but they both had naturally curly hair and they both thought professional wrestling was real, which are two pretty strong bonds when you think about it. Anyhow, that's why Zoe was a little hurt when Mick passed us on his bike that morning and he didn't say hi to her. "It's not you he's mad at, it's me," I said. We just had a fight and I called him a bad name. What bad name? I didn't want to tell her, but she wouldn't stop looking at me. Okay. It's the word that the comedian kept saying on the HBO special we promised your mother we wouldn't watch the other night. You could almost see Zoe's mind clicking down the choices. But as soon as she hit on the right one, she just shrugged it off. Cuss words don't impress Zoe one way or the other. He'll be over it by lunch, she said. I knew she was probably right. No matter how hard he tried, Mick could never stay mad at me. Like, even at his most furious, the longest he could last was a couple of hours. That's why I wasn't surprised when he came running up behind me as I was walking out of the cafeteria that day. Hey, Phoebe, wait up. I need you to do me a favor, okay? I need you to ride my bike home from school. Dylan Rigby's mother is taking a bunch of us to his house so we can rehearse the announcement for Friday's basketball game. He's got one of those Mr. Microphone things. He tossed me the key to his bike lock. I tossed it back. Sorry, I got soccer practice after school. Plus, I've got a ton of books to carry home tonight. He looked at Zoe, but she was already walking away. Can't do it either, Mick. If I don't take my science project home this afternoon, Mr. Garcia is going to drop me a whole grade. He says it's starting to stink up the science wing. Mick rolled his eyes. Great. Wonderful. Now I have to ride over there all by myself, and I don't even know where the kid lives. No big deal. You'll be fine, I said, casual as anything. Then I just walked away. I didn't even say goodbye. I'm running sprints at soccer practice when I hear the siren. I stop right away and stretch out my neck to see if an ambulance is coming. It bothers me that I'm kind of hypnotized by the sight of an ambulance. I don't want to be one of those creeps who gawk at accident scenes, but I am, I think. Because as soon as I see the flashing red light appear over the fence, I can't take my eyes off it. And so, like always, I just cover my ears and watch it come. The ambulance is getting close to the soccer field now, but instead of speeding past, it seems to be slowing down. Then it slows even more and turns the corner in front of the building. My stomach starts to churn. I don't like having the ambulance turn here. By now, it should be speeding off to someone else's neighborhood, a neighborhood where I don't know anyone. But even after another minute or two, the noise of the siren hasn't faded at all, and with my ears still covered, I walk to the sidelines and sit down on the grass. Just turn the thing off, I scream inside my head. Then they do. But the noise it makes as it winds down is worse than the siren itself. And I can't understand how some of the girls on my team have already started running sprints again. Then, all of a sudden, the door of the gym flies open and one of the school secretaries comes rushing out. The old one. Only she's moving pretty fast. Sprinting, practically, over to my coach. A few seconds later, Coach Brody is running full speed in my direction. I've replayed that scene in my head 100 times since the day it happened. But every single time I get to the part where Coach Brody's arms go around me, my muscles still tense just like they did that afternoon. Phoebe, honey, it's Mick, she says. And for the second time that day, I am shocked by what comes out of my mouth. I say, I know. Thinking back, I'm not exactly clear what happened after that. It's sort of like the film in my mind speeds up and there's just a blur of people walking to me to the office. And bits of pieces of conversation. Mick's name, the name of the hospital. Talk about how fast the ambulance got there. And it's strange, you know? Because the only thing I really do remember is the feeling that none of it was really happening. It's more like it was a play or something, and I was acting out a role. Like, the part of the victim's sister is being played by Phoebe Hart. So, I sat in the principal's office, and I sipped at the water the nurse gave me, and I let people smooth my hair. And I remember thinking how weird it was that instead of crying, I kept focusing on stupid stuff. Like how the nurse's zipper was halfway down, and how the principal, Mrs. Berryhill, could use a Tic Tac. Even when Zoe and her mother came into the office to take me home, I didn't fall apart or anything. I didn't even stand up right away. I just sat and waited until Mrs. Santos had finished signing me out. Then, calm as anything, I followed her and Zoe out to the car. The Santoses live across the street from me, so when Mrs. Santos took a left out of the parking lot instead of a right toward home, a signal went off in my brain that we were going in the wrong direction. And I automatically turned and looked out the back window. That's when I saw it. The truck, I mean, and Mick's bike. still lying in the gutter where he had fallen. I remember making a noise then, this awful noise that didn't sound like me at all, but like one of those old women that you see on the news sometimes. One of those crying old women at the scene of some terrible natural disaster. Oops, sorry. Zoe's arm went around me, but when she tried to talk, her voice was shaky and it kept breaking. Oh, God, Phoebe, please don't cry. Everything is going to be okay. I swear it is. I pushed her away. Stop it, I said. It sounds mean. I know it does, but the idea that anyone could comfort me was almost insulting, if you want to know the truth. My brother's bike was in the gutter, and I didn't want to be hugged or held or even touched for that matter. I just wanted for it not to be Mick. So I closed my eyes and I did the one thing I could. I prayed to God that it was all a terrible mistake and Mick hadn't been the one riding it. I prayed it had been one of his friends. I'm sorry for that. I swear I am. But still, that was my prayer. When we got to Zoe's house, there was a message on the answering machine from Pop. He told Mrs. Santos to keep me there until he came. That's when I was forced to face the fact that it was really Mick who had been hurt, and right away, I started begging Mrs. Santos to take me to the hospital. She didn't give in, though. She was nice about it, but she didn't give in. So, finally, I went to Zoe's room, climbed up on the top of her bunk bed, and started praying like crazy, ordering God to make my brother okay. I couldn't lie still. Even while I was praying, I kept tossing and turning and looking down at the clock on Zoe's dresser. One time, my arm dangled over the side of the bed, and Zoe reached up from the bottom bunk and held onto my fingers. It almost made me cry when she did that. Mrs. Santos... Oh, sorry, I'm having trouble. Okay. Mrs. Santos tiptoed into the room a few times, bringing stuff to eat. I told her I wasn't hungry, but I don't think my hunger had much to do with why she kept on fixing food. Grating cheese for nachos just helped make the time go by for her, I think. After her third trip, I remember looking over the edge of the bunk to see what all she had brought in. Besides the nachos, there was a pitcher of lemonade, chips and homemade salsa, 4 blueberry muffins, a bunch of grapes, and a package of Ho-Hos. I'm not kidding. It was like a meal that Henry VIII would eat or something. Henry VIII was that big fat glutton king of England with all the wives. You've probably seen actors playing him on TV. He's almost always shown gnawing on a turkey leg or with a slab of roast beef hanging out of his mouth or something. I wouldn't be such an expert on him, but Mick was Henry VIII for Halloween in 5th grade. That was the year he attached the beard with super glue and ended up wearing it to school for a week. Mick always dressed up as people you'd never think of in a million years. Like in 6th grade when he went as Clarence Birdseye, the father of the frozen food industry. And last October, he was Thomas Crapper, the guy who invented the modern-day flush toilet. It killed me remembering that. Remember last Halloween? Remember Mick? I'm sure Zoe was sort of shocked by the question. She didn't answer. I mean, she couldn't, not without laughing. Come on, Zoe, you remember? I don't know why I wanted to hear her say it. I just did. Finally, she made the attempt. Thomas Crap. But even before Crapper was out of her mouth, she busted out laughing. And then I did too. Which probably sounds terrible and all, but I promise it wasn't. All right, that's where we're going to stop for today. Have a good day.